The garden was already there when we bought the house. That was 1989. A previous owner, we never found out who, had planted a row of peonies along the back fence that bloomed every May in colors so loud they looked like they were arguing with each other. Pink ones, white ones, a dark red that was almost purple. They were old plants, established, the kind that survive neglect and droughts and the incompetence of every new owner who doesn't know what they have. My husband loved those peonies more than was reasonable for a man who worked in insurance. Every spring he'd go out with his clippers and his coffee and spend an hour just looking at them. He never picked them. He said cutting a peony was like interrupting someone mid-sentence. He died 4 years ago. Heart, like his father. Quick, which people say like it's a comfort, but isn't. The first spring after he was gone, I almost pulled the peonies out. Not out of spite, out of pain. They bloomed exactly the way they always did, completely indifferent to the fact that the man who loved them wasn't there to see them, and that indifference felt cruel. How dare they be beautiful when he was gone? I didn't pull them. I just stopped going outside in May. The second spring, my neighbor's daughter, a girl named Iris, which is almost too perfect for this story, knocked on my door and asked if she could draw the peonies for an art class. She was 16, quiet, carried a sketchbook everywhere like it was a vital organ. I said yes and went back inside. She came back the next day. And the next. She sat on my patio with her pencils and drew for hours. I watched her from the kitchen window. She was careful with them, not just drawing the flowers, but studying them, leaning in close, touching the petals like she was reading Braille. After about a week, she knocked again and showed me what she'd done. The drawings were beautiful. Not because they were technically perfect, the proportions were off in places, and the shading was uneven, but because she'd drawn them the way my husband used to look at them. With attention. With patience. I invited her in for tea. She told me she wanted to be a botanical illustrator. I didn't know that was a job. She said it was barely a job, but it was the only thing she wanted to do. She said her parents thought she should study something practical. I told her about my husband. About the coffee and the clippers and the way he'd stand there every morning like the peonies were performing just for him. I told her he sold insurance for 35 years and was perfectly fine at it and perfectly miserable in it, and the only place he was ever fully himself was in front of those flowers. She listened the way young people listen when they recognize their own future in someone else's past. The third spring, Iris brought watercolors. She painted all 7 plants, each one on a separate sheet, and gave me the paintings. I framed them and hung them in the hallway where my husband used to hang his coat. This past spring, the 4th without him, I went outside in May for the first time since he died. I brought my coffee. I stood where he used to stand. The peonies were blooming the way they always do, obscenely beautiful, shouting their colors at a fence that doesn't care. But I cared. For the first time in 4 years, I cared again. Not because the grief was gone, but because Iris had shown me that the peonies weren't indifferent. They were faithful. They came back every year whether anyone was watching or not. That's not cruelty. That's devotion. Iris is in college now, studying botanical illustration at a school in Philadelphia. Her parents came around. She sends me photos of her work, detailed, precise paintings of plants I've never heard of. Every May she texts me a single peony emoji. I'm 68. My knees hurt and my house is too big and I drink my coffee alone. But every spring I go outside and stand where he stood and I let the peonies interrupt me mid-sentence, which is what they've been trying to do all along.